I don't really practice time management anymore. I practice energy management.
Namaste. Today's guest is a true change maker, and she's going to be helping us talk about being a change maker. And the reason she's going to do that is because she is a social impact strategist, a professor, a TEDx speaker who helps people design lives of purpose and possibility. And as the CEO of Social Impact Architects, Suzanne Smith guides change makers at every stage, including those seeking a meaningful second act, which is what we're all about here on Design Your Life Your Way. So she has a framework called the 4Ts, and it blends strategy, soul, and storytelling to spark sustainable community impact. I love all those S's in her bio. That was really good, but I think I handled it well. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Suzanne up on the stage, and we're going to get right into talking about it all, how you can really make a difference in your life, in your life now and in the future. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And what a wonderful introduction. I'm going to have to use you for other ways I'm being introduced. That was lovely.
Well, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. And when we first connected and I learned what you're all about, I was like, ooh, yeah, this sounds just my cup of tea and just what I want to be able to talk about. So I think maybe what we'll start off with is right where I talked about. You have this framework called the 4Ts. So maybe you can start us off there and explaining what those are and how we can use them for greater impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, I'd kind of like to enter into the conversation around women over their 50s. And
Mm.
so I know you spend a whole lot of your time in your podcast really talking through what that second act looks like. And so let me just give a couple of some framing around why this is such an important time. So I do believe that society kind of talks about it being a wind up, wind down phase, but I actually think it's a wind up phase and that it's a powering up. And really, I think women, myself included, are really in that place of power. Not only do they have clarity around what they like and what they don't like, but they also have, the more capacity to do some of the different things that they want to do. And they have confidence and courage that they can actually kind of deploy. And so it's really a special group. And just to give a little bit of historical context, putting my professor hat on, many of the nonprofits that started in the early stages of kind of the evolution of the United States were started by women in their midlife. So think Clara Barton, think
Mm.
Harriet Tubman. And so while we're talking today about everyday change making, so how anybody can be a change maker, which is what my TED Talk is about, there's also this professional change making. So there's a lot of women, and some of my favorite CEOs of nonprofits are people who are in their second act. And
Mm.
they decided to then shift from a corporate job into a nonprofit space. And so I'm really excited about kind of sharing this topic and giving people an opportunity to talk about the variety of things that they can do in their community in this powering up phase, as I like to call it.
I like that. I love that idea of powering up because it's true. The old idea of retiring at 65, I think, has long gone by the wayside. I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer age group, and I know certainly people that are older than me are still, in their 70s and their 80s, being vital, and they're not necessarily sitting around watching TV and or playing golf. They're doing they're doing more than that, and so yeah.
Well, and that's where you touch on the science that I think is so important. That,
Mm.
I think I just saw the study last week, which I thought, of course, was very reinforcing of what I see in the community, which is that while cognitive speed may decline as you get older, actually cognitive processing power increases because we have so many collective experiences that we can pull from. We are
Mm.
actually able to kind of have a higher level of resilience and we have just so much knowledge. And so oftentimes we can go through a situation in a much more calm place. And
Mm.
so, from my perspective, that is absolutely what I see from the women that I work with, whether they're chair of a board of a nonprofit I'm working with, so an everyday change maker or a professional change maker. And so the science really supports that. And then to your point, we know when people give back in their community that there's this thing we call a helper's high, that it actually decreases depression, it actually decreases loneliness. We do have a loneliness epidemic based on what the previous Surgeon General said, and it increases all those happy hormones that we all want. And you don't have to do it alone. You can do it with a partner, you can do it with friends. It can help you kind of meet new friends. And so we're going to talk through all the different ways that your listeners can actually give back. And hopefully there'll be one or two that as they think about their 2026, they can dive into.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, and I'll share maybe later on just an experience I had yesterday, just that will demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. But yeah, so let's dive in a little bit now and get to the nitty gritty here and start sharing some of this good information here.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the four T's, which are my favorite. So if you think about the four T's and you think about all the different ways you can give back, you can just choose those different ones that are best with where you are. And so it's time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And so, of course, time is the first one because you're giving back. But what we find oftentimes when people give back is they sometimes underestimate just how a small amount of time makes a big difference. So, one of the things that we know longitudinally about young people is that if they have one or two adults that invest in them, it can change their trajectory. And I'm an example of that in the sense that when I turned 18, I actually got involved in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And so not only did I get a lot out of that program, but I was also able to invest in someone too. And we're still together. We consider each other family. And I see her really often. And so, thinking about the ways that you could potentially mentor somebody, you could help them with their reading skills. You can also dedicate your time as a professional and you can actually serve on a board. So thinking about how you can give your time. And what I typically remind people that to think about here is something that lights you up. And so whatever is something that, maybe you're directly connected to. So it could be healthcare charity. So maybe you have a friend that maybe has recently been diagnosed with a disease and you can give your time in that way through a health walk. Or maybe it's an after school program and you can give your time and helping to tutor somebody. So whatever is going to light you up, this is what you should be thinking about when it comes to your time. And so, because people who are in their second act kind of have more time, and I would actually say it's less about the actual time, because my belief is I don't really practice time management anymore. I practice energy management. And I think that my experience with people who are in midlife is they have really figured out what they like. You figure out who they want to spend time with. And so they end up having more quality time. And so, in this time category, I would encourage people, and I'd love your thoughts on this, to just really reflect upon what lights you up. What are some things where you could give back and you could feel like your time was well spent? And that energy needs to be a factor in that. Like you should come out of that experience feeling more energized from that volunteering experience versus less energized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that, well, as just to share an experience that I had yesterday, is that as we're recording this, it's the winter, and I live in the United States, and we're in a very fraught type of culture right now, and we're a lot of division going on. So there's a wonderful a woman that I met recently started a group that and invited people to come together where we can help to foster communication and try to be able to communicate with people who are who don't necessarily share the same ideas that you have, and to be able to try to listen to them, and because that's what we all want to be heard. And so we had about, I think, close to 20 people yesterday show up, and and a lot of people were talking about how they were feeling frustrated and angry and whatnot. But by the end, it was so great because we realized, wow, we had different beliefs, but we all felt heard, and we all felt like we all had something in common. and it was great, and we left feeling much more optimistic about, getting together again and seeing what else we can do. So to your point, yeah, I mean, that's the types of things that we can do. You don't have to be just stuck by yourself. You can look for opportunities to spend your time with people who get you. Right.
Agree. And I always encourage people to start local. There's a
Mhm.
lot of small needs that the community needs. I'll give an example. I had a neighbor of mine who realized that we were having some traffic congestion and even some accidents because there was a two-way stop that was kind of intermixed between four-way stops. And
Mm,
so she went to city council and said, look, we need to put better signs up so that people don't think that there's a series of four-way stops because it's not easy for people to understand.
yeah.
Getting speed bumps in your community. I
Hmm.
have in my local neighborhood, I have a group that basically they rotate cleaning up the park, and individual families kind of volunteer to do that together. And so it's just one of those things where it doesn't have to be big, it can be small.
Right.
And you kind of start small and build. So look local, start small and build, and then find the thing that lights your fire. Really think about the people that you want to intersect with and the issues that you deeply care about.
Mm.
And there are volunteer centers across the country who stand ready for you to kind of look at all the different things if you kind of want to see what's out there. But you can also email or call your local nonprofit and just say, hey, I want to volunteer. What are some ways in which I can volunteer?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll I will to include in the show notes a couple organizations that I am in particular a big believer in, and to help you then, AI is our friend, right? We can we can go
True.
onto Google and look in your community and see. But I do think you're right. It does have to be something that lights you up, because life is short and you need to spend it on things that are going to give you uh, a good feeling, give you purpose, but also be something that you can, look forward to doing.
And then the research also shows that if you can give that time consistently, you get a higher return. So
Mm,
rather than a scattershot effect where I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, if
right.
you find a volunteer activity, so maybe you're a docent or at your local art museum where you start building a community, that's actually also highly beneficial. So you almost get two for the price of one. You get the helpers high, but you also get community and connection at the same
Yeah.
time. So also finding something over time that you can commit to. So I oftentimes recommend just use a month to do exploratory time, and just spend time doing lots of different things. And
Yeah.
one of them will really stand out to you as being the thing that really you should stick with. And then stick with it for 6 months and see if it's still a match. And if it is, then you found the thing that you want to give back to that kind of lights you up. So that's really the my best advice when it comes to time.
Mm,
So the next one is talent, and they're kind of connected to each other, but they're a little bit different. In that, what I find from women, particularly who are in their second acts, so they've had an amazing corporate experience, or they have, been an entrepreneur and started a business, and now they've got extra time, but they also have this really amazing talent, and that talent can really be leveraged for the benefit of the social sector. So it could be government, it could be a nonprofit, it could also be an opportunity for that individual to eventually turn it into a nonprofit if they wanted to. So this is the former executive who wants to help a nonprofit by being on their board or going in and doing project-based volunteering. So maybe they need to streamline the way that the food bank actually does their intake process, or how they put out their food. So I see like retired Toyota executives being great with this. There's also people who, have a really good gift of emotional support, and maybe they've experienced something themselves. So they've had a loved one that has been in hospice, as an example. And that's such a experience that until you've actually been through it, you don't quite understand it. And so they go back and actually mentor people who have family members that are in hospice. So they've got this rare talent of connecting with people, and they're giving it back and kind of paying it forward. And so this is kind of a rare talent that you have. And what I typically tell people is find the thing that everybody keeps calling you for, and ask people what your talent is. But also sometimes it's the thing people are calling you and saying, I need you for this, because it
mm.
means you're uniquely talented, above average in that area. And you may want to kind of leverage that talent for social good.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I talk with my clients, it's a lot of times we don't necessarily put the value on it because it's something that just is second nature to us, but it is something that other people are like, oh, you can do that? Oh, please help me. So that's it.
I'll give a funny story. So, I have a couple board members who they don't like asking for money. And so that's really they've resisted joining a board because they're like, I'm not a fundraiser, I'm not an asker. And I always remind them, I was like, you also have to have stewardship because, as you know, the cheapest customer to get is the customer you already have.
Right.
And so I have two board members, one who has lovely handwriting. And so she just sits and writes these beautiful thank you notes after people make a donation that are personalized. And she sits there while she's watching her British mysteries and she just writes these beautiful thank you notes. And then there's another who loves talking on the phone.
Hmm.
And so she will call donors and say, I just want to tell you about what this after school program did. They had this huge thing on astronauts and the kids dressed up and there was this and there was that. I'm going to text you the picture and you just can't believe how cute it was. And just that quick phone call, because of course no one actually answers their phone anymore. It just goes to voicemail.
Yeah.
Able to do those phone calls over, a couple every day. And it has had dramatic impact on their donor stewardship as well as donor retention.
Oh, yeah,
And so
absolutely. Yeah.
those small things. I mean, one is handwriting and the other is talking on the phone. So, I mean, everybody's got talents that they can give back to the space. And, any nonprofit would love to have those kind of talents.
Yeah, I love that story because I can imagine it's so good to know that your money is going somewhere,
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, then it makes you feel that, oh, okay, well, maybe then I can, next time I have some extra, money that I want to be able to share. I know this is a really great organization. So talk about a win-win. That's excellent. So what's the,
Um,
or I don't know if you have another point about this, but we can go
no,
to
no,
the
no.
next
Time,
piece.
talent,
Yeah.
treasure. So treasure, we've talked a little bit about donating to the nonprofits, but I want people to think kind of broadly about what their treasure is, and really thinking about the way in which you could give back. So obviously, writing that check is important, but it's also your opportunity to bring people in who maybe don't quite understand all the great things that are going on in a community, and you could kind of create a magnetic effect. So, like I said, you can, if there's a particular charity that is consistent with a health condition that you're passionate about, you can get your friends to go on that walk together and they learn more about that. And it's not only building their awareness of the possible health condition, but you're also spending time together. Um, there's also opportunity for you to, join in a gala committee, or you can actually do what we call friend raising around that particular thing. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be your treasure. It could also be your friend raising towards that organization and the work that needs to be done. And of course, thanking people properly, stewarding people. Like I said, the docents who volunteer for art museums, they're incredible stewards. And people then, want to give back as a result. And so treasure is one of those things where it is important for the space to continue to get donations, particularly very recently where government has less and less money to give to nonprofits. So we need to support the charities that we most care about. But you can also find other people who can give back to that organization and learn about that mission. In addition to that, many women are entrepreneurs like myself. So you may also want to think about using your company to give back. And I'll give you a quick example of this. So there was a gentleman that I was working with who was in midlife, and he actually came to a lecture I did on giving back, and he's like, "Oh, this is just for corporations." And I'm like, "Well, let's think about that." And so he actually did some investigation. He asked his employees, like, if we were to give back, what would we do? And he really wanted to do more than just collecting, cans for a food drive or coats for a coat drive. And the employees said, well, let's adopt the local after school program. So that's what they did. They went to the local after school program. Because he ran an oil change company, they actually donated the oil changes. Over time, when they visited, they realized most of these young men and women had no idea about auto mechanics. So they actually then taught auto mechanics, like how to do an oil change, how to check your pressure in your tire.
Yeah.
And over time, they got closer and closer to the nonprofit, and they did a roundup campaign. So they rounded up the oil change, and many of their customers were very happy to do that. And then they even put like pictures on the wall of the work that they were doing. So while customers were waiting, they could
Right.
learn about this local after school program, which then led to additional donations. The last
Mm.
time I saw this individual, he's now on the board of that after school program. And it's those little
Well, uh,
small things that make a difference. And while he doesn't have the time or energy and doesn't need to actually do the calculations, he thinks it's actually helped his bottom line
mm,
because oil changes is a commodity and you
that's
can get
right.
oil changes anywhere.
Yep.
But the people in that community are choosing to use him because they
Mhm.
know he is invested,
Yep.
and because they've enjoyed the experience and they know that he's giving back to the community. And so that's another great example of if you're a woman who's running a business, you can also give back to the community in small and large ways that don't take a lot of your treasure, but it's really an opportunity for you to kind of give back to the community, and maybe it will lead to a better bottom line.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm always, well, not always, but I do get notices from local organizations, and they're always like looking for sponsors. Like, there'll be like golf tournaments, and like, you could sponsor a hole and things like that. And if they're a tournament that is, supporting a local charity, so there are ways that you can, as this gentleman found out, that it ultimately benefits your bottom line, because people do like to see that companies care. We too often we think they're these, faceless and organizations, and just out for money, but no, most of the time they're led by people who really do want to do good. Yes, you want to be able to make enough money to support your family or whatnot, but you also want to be able to be good stewards for your community. So I love that.
It's very true. So I have one more example. So if you also want to join a community of giving, there are now more giving circles across the United States for women than any other group.
Mm.
And so if you want to give and you want to connect with other women who want to give back, I guarantee you, if you live in a major metropolitan area, there probably is a women's giving circle. And there may be even ones connected to your ethnic background. So the Asian community, African American community, Hispanic community also has giving circles. That's also a really great way to work with other women. You actually pool your resources, pool your money, and then you deploy it to nonprofits that are directly connected to things that that group cares about. So
Mm.
that's another really great way of, again, getting a win-win where you're building community at the same time you get that helper's high.
I love that. All right. So what's our last T? I think you said it
All
was
right.
testimony, right?
Testimony. So testimony. So using your voice.
Mm.
And of course, this is all the stuff you would think of. So going to social media, going to Facebook, and if there's a charity or there's an issue you deeply care about, I know for myself, every time I get a mammogram, I always post it and say, women, this is important. You need to do this. So that's just a helpful reminder to make sure women are taking care of themselves. And you don't know what the impact is on that, but it certainly gets people to like clock in and say, have I had one in the last year? But also to really using your testimony to make sure that you're involved in things that are going on in your at your city hall. Maybe you need to testify about the importance of arts and culture funding or the importance of your libraries. So using your voice in that way. And so whether it's signing a petition, signing up to go speak to your city council, writing a letter, all of those things really matter. As someone who used to be in the policy space, I know that legislators and policymakers are counting the number of people who've contacted them around an issue before they make that vote. So using your voice, and it really does make a difference. And so doing it in those ways, I think, can be helpful. So social media, and certainly any kind of activism that you want to do to make sure that the government is acting in the way that you think most benefits the community. But I'd also encourage one other thing. So again, because we have this benefit of lots of experiences, I oftentimes say I'm a patchwork quilt of every person I've ever met. So that
Mhm.
quilt's pretty big now because I've met other women that have been pieces of what I have learned along the way. So I also encourage women to go back and guest lecture at universities or
Mm.
mentor young women because, of course, when we're very early on, we don't fully understand sometimes that it's a marathon and not a sprint, or any of the different things that are important to young women. And so allowing them to learn and benefit from your experience, I think, can be really helpful in the classroom. I also think it's just helpful for one-on-one mentoring. And so I definitely encourage you to contact your local university. I guarantee you there'll be professors like me saying, yeah, come in and guest lecture or come in and mentor young women who want to be entrepreneurs or want to be architects or want to be lawyers. Just to, again, give them that little bit of an edge, so as they hit those speed bumps, they have somebody that they can talk to and someone that can say, yes, this is really a speed bump, pay attention to it, or oh, don't worry about that. This is just how the road works and you'll get past it. So really helping them understand and help them kind of process where they are early on in their career. So really taking stock of all your lessons learned and giving back. And it has kind of a two-way effect. It helps the young women, obviously, but it also helps you kind of catalog, wow, look at all these things I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you can turn it into a blog or a podcast or, something written for future generations of like your pearls of wisdom that you've learned along the way. So I definitely recommend that from a testimony point of view as well.
I like that. And I think sometimes we forget, and all the things that we've done over our lifetimes, as you get older, and you may focus on some of the, more standout things and kind of forget the little things, but those little things also were useful and helped out other people. I like this idea of speaking to university students, college students, because I actually was invited one time to do that, and it was a great experience. But how what would you say? How do you go about that? Because, like, maybe do you want to contact like, say, the specific, let's say for me, so my background it is in mass communications, and I got my degree in radio, TV, film. Uh, so would I contact like that department first and just say, hey, do you ever have guest speakers come in, or how would you do that?
Yeah, so really twofold. So your instincts are absolutely right. So I would contact the local university. It doesn't have to be the one that you went to. I
Right.
would also encourage community college as well. I mean, these are
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
oftentimes it's their first time in college, which means that they didn't have parents who went to college or were in that career track. So they almost need more support and assistance. And so from my perspective, high school, community college, whatever you have in your local community is equally of benefit. It's really important for young women to see people doing the career they're most interested in, and sometimes also to choose what not to do. So I spent a whole lot of time talking to lawyers because I thought I was going to be a lawyer one day, and then I realized I'm not so sure if the way in which they do their work is aligned with who I am. And so sometimes choosing what not to do is equally important early on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also really important. So I would contact the department that is most closely connected. So the person who runs faculty, if you're wanting to be an adjunct or if you're wanting to guest lecture. But then I would contact career services, and
Mm.
those are the people who run the mentorship programs.
Right. Okay.
So typically, they're the ones who are kind of saying, yeah, I've got a student that would be great for you to talk to. And they will kind of funnel you into kind of their mentorship program. And believe it or not, I'm a big believer in reverse mentorship. I bet you are too.
Oh yeah.
That I always recommend to people who are mentoring is they really be open to what they're going to learn from young people. I
Mhm.
tell people the reason why I teach, one of the many reasons I teach, is it really is the fountain of youth. Like I feel like I'm younger and definitely hipper, and definitely am more connected because I get to interact with young people. And
Absolutely.
so I oftentimes have questions for them, like, well, how are you using AI? Or
Right.
what's the new cool thing that I need to know about? Or what does 6-7 mean? Like, can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
So I do believe in reverse mentorship of really asking them their opinions about things. And it just builds a lot more connectivity, and it kind of also reduces the pressure of kind of the insecurity that young people might have in asking difficult questions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I was the last one in my family. So my mom was 37 when she had me, and she used to say that I definitely kept her young because I was interested in things. And so, back in the day, we were watching David Letterman when he was on NBC. So we're going way back, and listening to music like, from Devo and things like that. And she was interested, and she liked that stuff. And so I kept her young. And so yeah, that makes so much sense because it is we can always learn. We can always learn,
Mhm.
and and it's so great to be able to have generations together. I know I had a guest on uh, my old podcast under that name of Live, Love, Engage, who did intergenerational travel for the same kind of reason, to
Mhm.
be able to bring people of different ages together so that they could learn from one another. So this is awesome, and I want to talk about one thing, because you have kind of alluded to that, and that you are. I saw somewhere where it says that you say that you're trilingual in like government policy and business, and I wonder what has been like sort of like the best, or what's been like some of your maybe big takeaways from being able to navigate those different areas.
I love that. So, just to give the listeners a sense, so I have a public policy degree from UT Austin. I worked in the nonprofit sector as a lobbyist and worked with them on strategy, and then shifted and decided I wanted to go back to school and get my master's in business at Duke. And so I oftentimes say I speak government and policy, nonprofit, as well as business. And what we know, and I call myself a social entrepreneur, is that some of the most complex issues that our society is dealing with. So take whatever issue you deeply care about. It could be the environment, it could be animals, it could be art, it could be homelessness. Those issues are so entrenched and they are so complicated. It is really going to require all of those sectors to come together to create a strategy moving forward. And so part of what we try to do at Social Impact Architects, as well as through our blog, Social Trend Spotter, which is on Substack, is really help educate people on the professional change making of like, how do you actually solve for these things? And so I think the thing that most stands out to me right now, and I'm so glad you asked this question, is that right now we're in what we call a poly crisis. And so 4 or 5 years ago at the Davos, they talked about all of these things that are coming together. And really, in some ways, it's shaking the very foundation of human society. And it's not any one thing, it's a lot of things. It's economics, it's AI, it's generational trends, like we were just talking about. And so economists and sociologists call that a poly crisis. And I think what can happen when you have that unsteady foundation and it's the first time you felt it is you think that, oh my gosh, things are falling apart. I'm overwhelmed by all that's going on. And so what I tell people, and I think I have the benefit of wisdom, but I also, because I was a history and government major, know I have the benefit of, decades of experience from all the history, centuries of experience, is that we've been here before as a society. If you think about what happened after the printing press or the radio, or the transition from the horse and buggy to the automobile, we've seen these kind of big shifts. And sociologists say they happen every 80 years. And we just have to adjust to these new circumstances, which is why I think the blending of the generations is so important, to help people understand that perspective. And we've solved social issues before. So it may feel as if we haven't solved the big issues right now, but we have. We've come really far on things like civil rights. I'm old enough to remember not wearing a seatbelt when I was a kid. I remember drunk driving being a big deal in high school. And now we've done a lot to solve that through Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Tobacco was something when I was growing up that was a big issue. And now, we've virtually extinguished really tobacco use, and very few people use tobacco now. And so I think we've really done a lot of work on a lot of social issues. And so what I try to remind my students and people when I speak is we've been here before. It's really about us having the right professional skills around change making, and continuing to persist. So, not getting overwhelmed, continuing to recognize every single day we as individuals make a choice around how we want to change the world. And
Mhm.
in our small little neighborhood, there is things we can be doing every single day to make it better, and just really leading into being a force for good individually as well as collectively.
Amen. I love it. Yeah, it does. And that was the one thing that was a little bit breaking my heart a bit last night at this meeting, with so many people were just feeling so overwhelmed and depressed, and my philosophy is trying to. I was telling one woman, yes, I know. And yet at the same time, I will see posts where they're talking about all communities are coming together and they're helping out one another and they're looking for ways to support each other, escorting kids to school and preparing meals and all of the stuff we can do right now, no matter what political situation is going on. It still comes back to just supporting. I mean, whenever there's like a natural disaster, the people rally around one another. We are still human beings, and we believe in. I believe that we're all inherently good anyway, and it sometimes does bring some stuff around for us to remember that yeah, we can help each other.
Well, and it goes back to what I talked about before, which is that I don't believe in time management. I believe in energy management. And so
Yeah.
I think right now, all of us need to control our energy and what we're consuming. And it's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why, and I know you and I talked about this, while I'm kind of on a personal campaign in 2026 to get people to less doom scroll and more hope scroll.
Hmm.
And part of the hope scrolling is making sure that you're consuming the right information, which is where the world is at a realistic level.
Right.
Knowing that the algorithm is probably going to create the doom and gloom itself. That's just where the
Hmm.
algorithm is at this point. But we
Yep.
can shift the algorithm. Who's in control of it? It's us.
Yeah.
And so if you post all the great things that you're doing with the nonprofits that you're working, if you talk about the stop sign thing that you got, if you talk about the city council meeting, people are going to then recognize they can kind of break through that moment of overwhelm and realize the only way through it is to find one thing that they're going to do differently and get that helper's high and really use their agency around something in their local community.
Mhm.
And honestly, I've seen the change in people. If they just take a month and really kind of explore their community, figure out where they can invest, then they actually the next month feel a whole lot better. And then they don't pay attention to the bad news that's happening. They just pay
Mhm.
attention to all the good that they're seeing. Because to your point, there's far more good out in the world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, good news just doesn't have the same PR engine that bad news
Yeah.
does. And so we
Yeah.
just have to be mindful of that in our practices and that energy management.
Absolutely. And there are and it's just reminding me right now that I know like during COVID there I had stumbled on somebody, and I think it was even someone who was a in the entertainment industry, was curating like good news, and
Mm-hmm.
they were doing all these videos, YouTube videos every week about good news. Oh, I know. I think it was the guy from The Office, actually, Jim
Mm-hmm.
Krasinski, that actor. But I know that there are even social media pages like on Facebook where they do, and I think it's called like the Good News Network. So it's
Yeah.
out there. We can find
Mm-hmm.
it. We can look for
That's
it,
right.
and you don't have to. And I know I've been guilty of it this morning. I realized I was like, put down the phone. What are you doing? You're doom scrolling again. Stop that. Stop, stop, stop. I have to slap my hand.
Well, and the science really supports it. If you haven't read Jonathan Haidt's work, I highly encourage it. In my class, I usually will have them read his early Atlantic article of why the last 10 years have made Americans uniquely stupid. And
Mm.
there are a whole lot of things about your phone you don't fully understand and how it is interacting with your brain. And it's almost like an addiction in many
Oh,
ways, which
yeah.
is why many states across the country and now some countries are actually banning it for young people. But I personally think we should be really helping people with regulation that are
Hmm.
adults.
Hmm. Yep.
Because just as an example with energy management, I don't watch the news after 8 p.m. Just like I don't take caffeine, I don't do any hard
Yeah.
news after 8 p.m. because otherwise it connects with
Oh,
my deep sleep
oh,
and my REM
absolutely.
and all the
Hmm.
things that I need, and it's just not good for me.
Yeah.
So I really do limit how much I'm interacting with bad stuff, and I really control my feed, which you can do.
Hmm.
You can shift the algorithm.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. You can even just on Facebook, you can just follow your friends. You can
yeah,
actually, if there is a friends feed, folks, and you
yeah.
don't have to be inundated with everything else. So this has been amazing, and we've covered a lot, but I just want to maybe just boil it down right before I ask you how people can
Mhm.
get in touch with you. So if people, the women out there listening to this today, could just take one thing from your message, what do you hope that would be?
I think it's really that they're not powering down, they're powering up and to
Mm.
live in that power and to really take that first month to build clarity around where their energy is best. So try a lot of things. things they're excited about, things where they can build connection, and then consistency. So really figure out that thing that is going to give that consistency to you. So that you're building a community, you're finding that helper's high on a regular basis, and you start seeing the impact of your work. And then start putting in some things where you've got some courage. You go and talk to a college class, or you go talk to city council, or other things where you're able to benefit from the wisdom that you've inherited over all this time period, and you're able to give it back to your community. And make sure all the things that the community needs in order to be successful and have quality of life can be there for everybody, for future generations. So just to live in that clarity and confidence and just that courage, and just know that you are standing on the shoulders of a lot of women who in their midlife have really been the silent engine behind a lot of the social change that has happened. And so we're excited to have you join us. I'm excited to see what these women do. And I'm looking forward to engaging with them if they have questions.
I love that. So, yes. And I did like at the very beginning. So if you happen to tune into this podcast towards the middle or towards the end now, go back to the beginning, because Suzanne wonderfully mentioned that there were, our country, a lot of these nonprofits were started by women. Women
Yep.
really are, and I remember looking at something too. Someone else was talking about this a while back, where I was on a webinar, and they talked about that, like a lot of the great change, really making a change, making a positive difference in our country has happened from women. Women
Yeah, I call them
are the
founding
instigators.
so many founding mothers. Cokie Roberts came up with that phrase, and I've always loved it.
Yeah.
And those founding mothers are still with us. I see them every day in the board chairs that I get to work with, the nonprofit CEOs who are in their second act, the volunteers who are running the gala, the giving circles that I see. It's that quiet activation that happens like underneath the surface, which really, again, goes back to our very origin story when Alex de Tocqueville went back to Europe and said, "What's special about America? This is a nation of joiners, and when they have an idea, they move forward with it, and they move forward with speed." And it really was the women who were the quiet group behind that made all those things happen. So, and we still have those women who are working so hard in communities. And so I encourage folks who are listening to join the Army, because those women are out there, and they need more people. They need reinforcements.
Absolutely. Awesome. So if someone wants to find out more about change making and how to learn more about making a social impact, where can people reach you?
Absolutely. Well, I definitely encourage them to go to Substack and subscribe to our weekly blog, Social Trend Spotter. You can also do it on our website and get it in your email box, whatever works best for you. We also have 13 years archived on that website. So if there's something that interests you with its movements or its some of the things we've mentioned, you should be able to find it there. And then I also have my first book coming out called Flywheel, and it actually is about professional change making. And so if you are in the nonprofit space, it is the book for you. It'll help you kind of give that 101 guide, whether you're new to the nonprofit space or you've been in the nonprofit space before. It'll hopefully be a great opportunity for you to kind of learn all the different dimensions of what it takes to do professional change making. So we'll put that all in the show notes, and I look forward to engaging with you guys in this next phase of your journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yes, we'll definitely have all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for giving such an important topic time and space. It's been an honor.
Well, I do want to thank all of you for listening and for watching today. And I hope you're encouraged to know that you can go out and make a difference today. It doesn't have to be huge. Remember, you can just start small. One phone call, one knocking on a door, or just calling a friend and calling or reaching out to an organization that you feel passionate about, and know that you can make a difference. And I love that when Suzanne's talking about this helper's high, I think that is so good, because I know if you are feeling like depressed or something, that I know when I've experienced that, one of the best ways I've found to get myself over it is to reach out and help somebody else. It really does make a difference. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're not subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe on YouTube. You also can check us out on newrealitytv.com as well. And until we meet again, I just want you to go out and just make today great.